It's a great pleasure for me to welcome some of the most distinguished writers on these themes. So we have Dr. Ajay Sekhar on the extreme right, who has written extensively on Buddhism. Next, we have Dr. Udayakumar, who has written extensively on Sri Narayana Guru, and he'll be speaking on Sri Narayana Guru. Between us, hovering spectrally, is Professor Sanal Mohan, who has written an absolutely magisterial work on the modernity of slavery, which looks at the dissenting Dalit Christian theologian P.K.Yasser Yohanan and the ways in which he engaged with the British missionary definition of Christianity. To my immediate left is P.K.Yasser Arafath, who teaches at Delhi University, who's done extensive work on Malabar, and I've asked him to come and speak to us on Makti Tangal. He's got a book coming out which is not specifically on Makti Tangal, but on Islam, Indian Ocean, Malabar, and so on. And on my extreme left is Vinil Paul, who's done excellent work on Iyengali and other Pulaya leaders. So we look forward to a treat here. So I'll just begin. I'll ask each of the speakers here to speak for around 10 minutes and try and think about their particular thinker, whether it's P.K.Yasser Yohanan or Iyengali or the general landscape of Buddhism in relation to social reform and thought about social reform in the early 19th century and how we might connect it to the kind of thinking that is emerging from Vakkom Moulavi. So that's really the broad question. So perhaps we could start with Ajay Sekhar, so 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dilip Menon and respected friends here. As Dilip Menon has mentioned, in South India, and India as a whole in late 19th century, it was Pandit Ayodhi Dasar who initiated the discourse of modern Buddhism in collaboration with Anagariga Dhamapala from Ceylon and Sinhalese Buddhist monk, and also in connection with some of the leaders from the West, Colonel Olcott and Theosophical Society and so on. And that was in the 1890s. He began his Shakya Buddhist Society in the Nilgiris in the 1890s. And soon after, in early 20th century, it was the disciples of Narayana Guru, especially Sahodar Nayappan and C. Krishnan, who initiated the second modern Buddhist kind of movement in Kerala as part of the Kerala Renaissance struggles and the confrontation with modernity. So it was the Guru who actually formally inaugurated that discourse in Kerala by visiting Sri Lanka. In 1918, the Guru visited Sri Lanka. He crossed that Park Strait and went to Sri Lanka on that British steamer. And even in that 1916-17, what we call the Daiva Dashagam, he imagined God as a British steamer. His very powerful and illuminating metaphor, we know. Avi Vandoni Nin Padam. So that British steamer imagined as the plane of God. And in Sri Lanka, in a debate on religion, he proclaimed that my religion is that of the Buddha. Nammudedum Buddhamadam Tanne. If you have doubt, I can cite the scripture. And he cited the Amara Kosha, which was compiled by Amara Simha, a Sinhalese Buddhist monk, somewhere around CE 5th or 6th century. That is the codification of Amara Kosha, which is still used, which was traditionally used in South India, in Kerala in particular, for Sanskritic and Prakrit education. And that lexicon, more than 1,500 years old lexicon, was cited by Narayana Guru. And he cited the synonyms of the Buddha there. that were compiled by Amarasimha. So Dashabalo, Shadhabhitno, Advayavadi, Vinayaka, 18 synonyms are there. He cited a few. And he said he is in the path of the Advayavadi, the original Advayavadi, that is the Buddha. So the Anityavada or Samudayavada, the Paditya Samutpada Vada of the Buddha, the theory of impermanence, cause-effect rationality, the foundation, that was cited by Narayana Guru in 1918 in Sri Lanka in a debate on religion, and he claimed that ours is also the religion or the opinion, because he considered religion as a synonym of opinion. Opinion was the primary signification that he was giving to religion. So he claimed that. And he also cited the Amarakosha to prove his position that he belongs to the path of Anityavada or the real Advayavada of the Buddha. And soon after, it was his disciple Sahodaran and Mitavadi C. Krishnan, Advocate C. Krishnan, Vakil of Malabar. They inaugurated the Neo-Buddhist discourse in Kerala. They have started many sanghas, smaller sanghas, and they have individually converted to. Sahodaran has formally and legally converted to Buddhism. And all the other major disciples of the Guru, like Dr. Palpu, CV Kunyaraman, Mulur, Justice Ayakuti, and of course, Sahodaran and Midavadi, they were all intellectually and culturally inclined towards Buddhism, and they have taken the Panchashila. They didn't have that formal Diksha ceremony, but of course they were culturally and intellectually affiliated to the Panchashila and the Ashtanga Marga of Buddhism, and they were personally very close followers or Dhammacharis in that, Dhammacharis or Dhamma Mitras as we can call them. So that is the beginning, and in the verses of Sahodaran, in the poetry of Sahodaran, you find the first Buddha Kanda, the Buddhist verses emerging in Malayalam, modern Malayalam. The Buddha Kanda, that is part of his poetic works or verses, 1934, which was published in book form from the Tonakal Sharada Book Depot by Mrs. Kumaranashan. You find that Buddha Kanda, where you find some 12 poems directly dealing with, illustrating the foundational ideas of the Buddha. The Buddha Stotram, Chatur Satya Stotram, Samabhavana, Onapata, which is about the Mahabali myth and all. Vamanadarsam Vedinirenam, Mabali Valcha Varuthirenam. You must leave aside the ideology of Vamana, that is Brahmanical patriarchal ideology, and you have to bring back or recover the old legacy, the egalitarian legacy of Mahabali, who was supposed to be Danadharmi and a Buddhist kind of egalitarian ruler, according to Sahodaran. So even Mahamangala Sutta was directly translated or rendered into Malayalam by Sahodaran in that verse. And also many Pali verses are transliterated on the Buddha directly from the Pali kind of sources there. And Sahodaran also prompted, he has written many commentaries and editorials on Buddhism, on the theme of Buddhism in Kerala in early 1920s and 30s. And he also prompted his elder poet, the first Avarna poet to be recognized in the literary public sphere of Kerala, that is Mulur Padmanabha Panikar, to do a direct translation of the Dhammapada of the Buddha, which is part of the Tipitaka. And Mulur completed it. It was a huge kind of project, and Mulur completed all the 400 and plus verses in the Dhammapada into Malayalam, into a contemporary modern Malayalam in verse, in the Kilipat of Ezhuthachan. Mulur has tried to do that poetic translation, which is the available and sustaining kind of poetic translation that is lingering there in Kerala, which is available today as in book form. So that was completed in 1925. but he couldn't publish it during his lifetime. Mulur passed away in 1931. And his son, N.K. Damodaran, he published it later only in the 1960s. Early 1960s it was published. So this is the centenary. 2025 is also the centenary of the Malayalam, the first Malayalam poetic translation. The first translation, of course, was done in prose by Thelagathu Nambi in 1916. But the poetic verse translation of Mulur, that is having the centenary this year, this Kumbham, in the summer of 2025, it falls the 100 years of Dhammapada in Malayalam verse, in poetry, in the CLIF part. So it was Sahodaran Ayyappan who prompted Mulur to do this translation, which is having 100 years now. And then in Malabar, Sri Krishnan has, he was editing the Mitavadi there, so he's also known as Mitavadi, and he has written elaborately on the Buddhist themes of Malabar and Kerala in Mitavadi. And also he has written another short prose piece, a treatise called Buddha Tattva Pradipika. Buddha Tattva Pradipika is the philosophy of the Buddha, of course, on Ashtamarga, Panchashila, and Chatursatya, and Trisharana, or triple gems and asylum. So that is called the Buddha Tattva Pradipika. But unfortunately, it is lost today. The print version is lost, and only we have some other references or commentaries on the Buddha Tattva Pradipika by Mitavadi. Then Justice Ayyakutti also was prompted by Sahodaran Ayyappan. Justice Ayyakutti happens to be another disciple of Naranaguru, and who is also the father-in-law of Sahodaran, Mrs. Parvati's father. So he also tried to do another translation in prose, but unfortunately that's also lost. So only Mulur's Dhammapada is surviving today. And later, of course, in the 1940s, 1946, 47, when Ambedkar came to the Constituent Assembly, it was Sahodaran Ayyappan who greeted him publicly in a literary piece called Jadi Bharatham. Jadi Bharatham is a political kind of poem in which he salutes Ambedkar as a modern Buddha. He imagined Ambedkar as a neo-Buddha or a modern Buddha or the Buddha of the future. And he says, Ambedkar, your name will be chanted as a mantra, as a Sharana mantra of Buddhism, as triple gems, Sharanam. You will be remembered by future India with a lot of reverence and gratitude, because you have founded the principles of liberty, equality, fraternity, that of the values, the key values of modernity you have created here single-handedly in India. So that was the salute even before his conversion. Conversion happened in 1956, we know, in Nagpur. But in 1946-47 period, when he was elected to the Constituent Assembly, it was Sahodaran Ayyappan who saluted him.
Ajay, one more minute. Yeah. 1 more minute to round up.
Okay.
And we'll come back to you in the second round.
Okay, I'm concluding. So Sahodaran also imagined, and he began that discourse of Ambedkar as a neo-Buddha, or Buddha of the present and future in India. So this is my preliminary remarks on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is extraordinarily lucid, and it's really admirable to find somebody speaking so eloquently without notes at all, or even looking at a piece of paper. But thank you so much. And it's actually opened up for us a kind of hidden history, because not many of us, when we talk about social reform in Kerala, bring up the history of Buddhism. And a lot of the work that Ajay has done has allowed us to engage more seriously with this strand of thought which continues to be strong in a very, very hierarchical society, such as we continue to live in, where questions of rationality, questions of equality have been put forward with such power and force by the Buddha. Thank you so much, Ajay. We move on to Dr. Udayakumar, who will be speaking to us on Sri Narayana Guru. And what Uday has actually managed to, in many senses, introduce Sri Narayana Guru into Indian academic discourse, and not only on Kerala, because now those who are engaging with the literature and history of modern India, regardless of which region they're working on, have to engage with some of the writings that Uday has done. So over to you, Uday.
And thank you, Sajida and Vakkom Moulavi Foundation for organizing this really fascinating conference. I feel that it's really interesting what we have been trying to do here yesterday and today, because it's an attempt to rethink the moment of social reform, the moment of transformations, which we loosely refer to as modernity, the advent of modernity, in relation to a different sets of geographical coordinates as well as temporal coordinates. And it is with that in mind that I intend to make a few remarks at the outset here. Navothanam, which is the word which we use for referring to this period, in some sense, it belongs to a kind of cultural historical template which is partly inherited from the Western world. Collapsing ideas of the Renaissance, Reformation, Enlightenment, many of these things. I do not know when we began using the word Navothanam, because as Korea pointed out yesterday, the word which was used often in Moulavi's own writing was Perishkaram. Now you find the word Perishkaram coming up quite a lot, and Navikaranam coming up, but not really Navothanam. And I feel that one of the challenges in the contemporary moment in Kerala is to kind of define our present in a kind of critical relationship to this Navothanam, re-estimate the idea of Navothanam. So in that sense, this conference is also happening at an important moment and has a relationship to that critical rethinking of the Navothanam. I feel that one of the ways in which we can understand this moment, which also relates to what Ajay has been saying, is that this is the time in Malayalam when the discursive traditions of what we can call religious thinking develop a conception of the social. A notion of the social, which is not really that of a particular religious community or a particular caste community, but a larger idea of the social, but which nonetheless is elaborated within the discursive formation of religion. So Narayana Guru's work and Chattambi Swamigal's work, many of the Apoigil Apachan's work, all these actually belong to that larger historical moment. Now, what is it to work with authors? The authors are also proper names. So these are proper names which are also invoked for authorization. Yeah? And we know that one argument which has been made about the Sri Narayana movement is that the movement itself, in its secular ambition, was really the work led by Dr. P. Palpu. And it is after the encounter with Vivekanandan that Palpu is persuaded or encouraged to find a spiritual leader to spearhead the movement, a spiritual leader who is already there, like Narayana Guru. So the proper name of Narayana Guru becomes like a counter-signature to a set of initiatives which are being made at that time. This is one of the readings. But at the same time, Narayana Guru himself already has done the Arivipuram consecration of an idol, an orthodox consecration of an idol. There are initiatives already there, and he has already come up with his motto that this should be a space without any discrimination of caste or religion. So these are already in progress. So what I'm going to say today is, in the beginning, is not only about Narayana Guru, but also this Narayana Guru Palpu, this kind of two-pronged engine, which we often see as the Sri Narayana movement. There are interesting differences there as well. Now, there are differences. There are two kinds of discourses right from the beginning of the Sri Narayana movement. On the one hand, there is Narayana Guru's own writing, which is imagining a world without caste. In fact, resonant with the idea of annihilation of caste. Like the praise, Narayana Guru praises one of his disciples, Satyavrata Swami, saying that he does not have caste. He has no caste. His caste is nil. Yeah? Jadi illa. That's the word which is used. So this is one aspect. On the other hand, you also find that SNDP, Sri Narayana Dharma Peripalana Yogam, even though it is presented as a yoga for maintaining Sri Narayana Dharma, you also have the idea that this is an organization for the upliftment of the Irava community, which is suffering certain historical iniquities. So there are these two kinds of dimensions right from the beginning. And you will also find that the early discourses defining the Sri Narayana movement maintain this. On the one hand, you have the Kshetra Yogam, which comes out of this consecration of the temple. On the other hand, when SNDP, Sri Narayana Dharma Peripalana Yogam, is institutionalized, it is registered under the Company Act as a joint stock company. Yeah? So these are interesting things to bear in mind. Now, I would like to comment briefly on these two discourses which come up and the distinctive idioms of Narayana Guru and Palpu, which both are important for understanding this moment. Now, in Narayana Guru, you will find that yesterday, actually, we had some discussion about this whole idea of reform which comes up in Vakkom Moulavi as the removal of historical accretions and restoring something to its originary state. At the same time, as Kuria was trying to alert us, this is accomplished in a language which is innovative, which is closer to what we see as what was criticized as a Sanskritized Malayalam, which is emerging as the language of public discourses in Kerala at that time. So on the one hand, a return to some kind of authenticity. On the other hand, the creation of a kind of new language. These seem to go together. In Narayana Guru, the interesting technique which he uses is, you could say, a kind of paring down to the minimum, a kind of literalization. The word for religion in Malayalam, for people who are not from Kerala here, is madam. Now, madam literally means opinion. So Narayana Guru says that madam means opinion. So everybody's opinions keep changing. So Abhyantara madam or internal religion is constantly in flux. But there is something called external religion or external opinion, which is a collectivity formed on the basis of shared opinion. That is what you call samudayam, etc., etc. Now, jati, similarly, is people who are born of the same thing. That is literally reduced to the idea of species. So you have the notion that the only jati is Manishya Jati. And Manishya Jati's distinctiveness, according to Narayana Guru, is a peculiar kind of ignorance. Just animals can recognize each other, that they belong to the same species, but human beings cannot recognize other human beings as belonging to the same species because of caste. Yeah? So this is the peculiar idea of literalization, which he actually uses. Now, Palpu's strategy, on the other hand, is somewhat different. It is trying to create a kind of speculative history of caste inequality in Kerala. Now, this comes up in a number of ways. Palpu, Narayana Guru, you could say his major forms of writing or major productions were, you could say, metaphysical and poetical works, then instructional writing, where he's writing brief instructions to the community and the organization, and finally, these anecdotes about conversations, where he displays a kind of acerbic humor, which is often meant to shake people out of their habits of thinking. Now, Palpu, on the other hand, his major form of writing in the early years was the petition. Now, petition can take the form of formal petitions submitted to the government, but it can also take the form, as in his correspondence with colonial officials and nationalist movement leaders, very long letters which he sends to these people. I have seen 150 pages of typewritten letters, where he is actually developing a kind of speculative history of caste in Kerala, raising ideas of justice through that. So these are two different. Narayana Guru, on the other hand, is not particularly interested in this notion of a history and notions of restitution, whereas in Palpu, that's a very crucial idea. Now, to conclude, and I will come back to these things, Palpu also uses these speculative histories to imagine a different geography. Now, this is important. Like in Narayana Guru's case, you could say his geographical location itself is very closely connected with a part of Kerala which we earlier used to refer to as southern Travancore, which begins with places like Trivandrum, goes on to the south to what is now Kanyakumari district, and the particular lower caste movements which come from there, spiritual traditions which come from there, they were absolutely central to his formation. At the same time, he is writing in Sanskrit, Tamil, and Malayalam, and so there is a particular kind of geography. Palpu, on the other hand, uses this preoccupation with Buddhism and the speculative history of caste to develop a kind of imagination of a transoceanic Buddhist empire which existed in prehistorical times. And this transoceanic empire spans the geography from Indonesia to Mexico. And so it is that imagination which is actually distinctive about a certain imagination of justice. It is contrasted with two other kind of imperial imaginaries. One is the colonial imagination of geography, and the other is the Brahminical imagination of geography. So I'll stop there, and then we can talk.
Again, Udayan has raised a huge set of issues here, and I hope we can return to some of these in questions from the audience and so on. The first is this question of language. How do we think about this whole historical movement of social reform, Navothanam, Parishkaram, Navigaranam? Also the question of how are we to speak about this idea that governs us, courses through us, defines us, and prevents us from creating one Manushya Jati, the idea of madam, an idea of dharmam, and so on. So I think this question of religion, the question of language, these are questions that we can probably return to. Sanal, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you.
So Sanal, if you could just reveal yourself. Thank you. So now Sanal will speak to us. Sanal, as all of you know, is one of the author of one of the classic texts on modern Kerala, The Modernity of Slavery. So I invite you to now speak for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilip. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel, where I see my very dear friends. So once again, thank you very much to the organizers, Vakkom Moulavi Foundation, and also to Dilip Menon for giving me this opportunity. So I just talk about P.K.Yasser Arafath and the salvific time. So it's all about when Dilip invited me to talk just now, reveal myself. It is, he asked me to reveal myself, but it's all about a certain kind of revealing. I put it differently as very distinctively question of revelation. And those who are not familiar with P.K.Yasser, just quickly go to his bare minimum biographical details. Sorry. So he was born on 17th February 1879, and he died in the year 1939, June 29th. So, yeah,
Sanal, could you just speak a bit louder because we can barely hear you? Just speak a bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is it better now? Is it better now?
It's excellent, yes.
Okay, thank you. When he started his itinerancy as a preacher, which has a very long history of interaction with different Christian denominations and also innings with the missionaries, etc. in the early 20th century Travancore. So he was based in Tiruvalla at a village called Iraviperu. So that was in fact his headquarters. But then He moved across different villages, organizing the people who had this history of slavery or enslaved communities, Pulayas, Parayas, and other oppressed castes. But we also find him as a Christian preacher. So those times he would be known as one Upadeshi, basically a pastor who had acceptance even among the traditional Syrian Christians who were part of this, missionary Christianity, and also who were part of certain denominations, the traditional churches, particularly that of Marthoma Church, Reformist Marthoma Church. Now, this is all about, I'm not going into the details of this part of it. So now, what he suggested for the enslaved castes of Travancore, since Travancore has emerged as a distinctive locale, some of his songs he would refer to Tiruvidampur. And so therefore Tiruvidampur remains as a political social space. Very much in the writings, as we have writings of people like Vakkom Moulavi and many others that were discussed yesterday, Travancore is a distinctive political social space. And it is this space, it was in this space that the contestation was taking place. So therefore, in the Johanan state context, we find two things became very prominent. One is the whole religious kind of engagement with different denominations of Christianity. He had his own kind of problems with Protestant Christianity, but obviously he had his troubles with the traditional Christians who were practicing caste and who were ostracizing the oppressed caste people who joined Christianity, etc. And then he has his own kind of problems with the dominant caste of Travancore, the region where he came from. And therefore, if we, now a lot of these songs of P.K. Johanan are available in different mediums, primarily in print. So we get quite an interesting kind of information on how, for example, he has been talking about, as I said earlier, Travancore as a significant location for all these negotiations. And he would also say that this is a space where we have to live. So if I just quote him, in Malayalam, he would say that, Anandamai unnu vazhaname, imbamerum nalla Tiruvidampurine shantamai unnu irikkanam. This is all exhortations given to the the local rulers and saying that all the problems of Travancore needs to be resolved. Basically, he is referring to the caste questions and so on. And then seeking the support of the local political rulers, the monarchy, to resolve these questions and so on. This is the political dimension of that. Now, so what I said about the time of salvation, which is very significant because this particular time is significant for the oppressed caste in Travancore way back, probably since 1850s when the large numbers of players and other oppressed castes began to join the Protestant missionary organization like the CMS, Church Missionary Society, and that's the time. That's the period that from that period onwards we find them entering a very different, kind of time, which as I referred to here as salvific time, and then getting connected with the larger biblical discourses, the whole idea of time and history, which some of our interlocutors referred to as redemptive history, which Johann was attempting. So I'm referring to one of the articles of Janaki Nair, where she refers to this whole idea of redemptive history being developed in Travancore. So this is something Professor Nair referred to this in the context of the kind of debates in the area of public history, but we find this happening long back. In the whole idea of redemptive history becoming part of the salvific time. So, to my mind, as I don't have time to go into all the other details of that, one of the things which Virgil Johann did excellently, as far as the southern part of Kerala is concerned, was to think about this salvific time. And then if we take this is really a global kind of thing. Probably you find this salvific time of a different kind among the Arubas in West Africa, or the Zona community in the southern Africa, about which we have anthropologists like Matthew Angelke talking about. So there are many others, very prominent anthropologists writing on Christianity in southern Africa, like Komarov's talking about this kinds of time, or Peel talking about this. So I'm just referring to this to show that this opening up of a new notion of time that we find in Johannan's kind of discourses. It take us towards a different realm of time and a different kind of geographical imagination, where we find missionary Christianity redefining the whole thing. And, you find a similar kind of, the dynamics could be different, but then there are elements with which we can definitely, enter into a comparison. And if that's the case, what made this sort of a comparison possible? There, I think, one major strand of that possibility, one major strand of that possibility is Protestant missionary Christianity. And the other one is his engagement with the problem of slavery. Now, slavery, in fact, would take us, obviously, across the oceans. The kind of histories that have been referred to yesterday also, spanning across the Indian Ocean, going as far as Indonesia and the Cape Colony and all that in South Africa. So there is a, the whole terrain of Indian Ocean, the space of Indian Ocean trade, where slaves from this part of India, or slaves from Kerala coast, or even Coromandel coast, found their place. And now this history of slavery that is, in Johannan's kind of songs and discourses and utterances, we find it more related to the history of enslaved agricultural laboring castes of Kerala. But then it was around around the same time that we also get information about people being taken out of this place, people entering the Indian Ocean routes as commodities and so on. So Protestant Christianity and this global history of slavery provided as the kind of an entry points to talk about a larger kind of history, which actually that history doesn't stop with Travancore. So it actually has a potential that goes beyond the confines of Travancore, and definitely enters the the imagination of land and communities across the Indian Ocean. And the other couple of points that I want to talk about is the time and space.
Sorry, Sanal, you 1 more minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will by that. So we have this whole question of talking about what is being revealed through this new engagement with Protestant Christianity. So in fact, there are a lot of things being talked about today when it comes to Virgil Johannan's case. So I was just trying to look at the the lifetime of Johannan himself, when these discourses were very different, and the question of revelation remained as very, very central to his concern. alongside the question of salvation. So these two elements would definitely, we know that, would take him and place him squarely within the global history of, a transaction of ideas and, the question of languages, because, in the context of Protestant Christianity, we know that those anthropologists who are studying Christianity talk about, this whole business of translation. And we find that taking place, the translation of, in terms of language and in terms of, particularly in terms of concepts and ideas derived from the Bible, in a big way in Travancore. And Johan and occupies a very peculiar position in that sort of exchange of ideas. Thank you very much.